For months, she stayed silent, enduring his cruelty, but when he crossed the line, her father, the town's new police chief, made sure justice was served. The lunchroom at Westridge Middle School was a battlefield. But not the kind where fists flew or food fights broke out. It was quieter than that. It was the kind of place where a single look could say everything: who belonged, who didn't, who mattered, who didn't. 13-year-old Eva Sinclair sat at the far end of the cafeteria, picking at the edges of her peanut butter sandwich, pretending not to hear the whispers 2 tables away. Why does she always sit alone? Someone muttered. Maybe she doesn't have any friends. Eva had heard it all before. She wasn't new to the feeling of being an outsider. She was one of the few black students at Westridge and had learned early on that blending in wasn't an option. Instead, she tried to stay invisible, moving through the halls like a shadow, keeping to herself. It was easier that way, but not for Connor Tate. Connor had made it his personal mission to make sure Eva knew exactly where she stood. He wasn't just another kid at school. He was the kind of boy who walked like he owned the place, the son of a local businessman with friends in all the right places. Connor was the name teachers said with a smile, the kid parents invited over for pool parties, the one who could talk his way out of anything. And for the past month, he had decided Eva was his favorite target. It started small, shoving her books off her desk, accidentally bumping into her in the hallway. The kind of things no one would call bullying, just kids being kids. But it never stopped there. Today, it was her lunch. Eva had barely taken a bite when a hand snatched her paper bag off the table. She looked up, and there he was, grinning like this was all a joke. What you got, Sinclair? Connor tore the bag open, pulling out her sandwich with exaggerated disgust. Peanut butter? Seriously? Guess your dad's new job doesn't pay enough for real food. Laughter rippled through the table behind him. Eva's fingers curled under the table, her jaw tightening, but she stayed silent. She always did. Connor leaned in closer. You know, you should really say thank you. I'm just trying to help you diet. He tossed the sandwich over his shoulder, and it landed with a soft splat on the floor. Eva's stomach twisted. She wasn't going to cry. Not here. Not in front of them. She reached down to grab what was left of her lunch. But before she could, a foot came down, smashing the sandwich into the tile. Connor smirked. Oops. For a moment, the world shrank. It was just Eva, the crushed sandwich, and the sound of their laughter ringing in her ears. She could feel their eyes on her, waiting to see what she would do, but she already knew. She grabbed her backpack and stood, pushing past the tables, ignoring the whispers, the snickers, the heat burning behind her eyes. She kept walking past the cafeteria doors, past the lockers, all the way to the girls' bathroom. She locked the stall, sat on the closed toilet lid, and took a slow breath. This was nothing new. She would wait until the lunch bell rang, then slip out and pretend none of it ever happened. Because telling someone never worked. The teachers would say, just ignore him. The principal would call it a misunderstanding. And tomorrow, it would all start again. But Eva didn't know that tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, she would fight back. And tomorrow, Connor would push her further than he ever had before. But right now, all she could do was wait. Eva barely spoke when she got home that afternoon. She went straight to her room, shutting the door softly behind her. She wasn't the type to slam things. She knew how to disappear, even in her own house. But her father noticed. His deep voice carried through the door. Everything all right? She hesitated. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her backpack before she dropped it onto the bed. Yeah, just tired. There was a pause. Then a quiet sigh. All right, dinner's in an hour. She waited until his footsteps faded before she exhaled. He had enough to deal with, moving to a new town, stepping into the chief's office, dealing with the mess left behind by the last guy. She wasn't about to add middle school drama to his plate. She could handle it, except the next day. Connor made sure she couldn't ignore him. It started before first period. Eva was pulling books from her locker when she felt something slam against her back, hard. She stumbled forward, her forehead nearly smacking into the cold metal. Laughter. She turned slowly. Connor leaned against the lockers, smirking. My bad, Sinclair. Didn't see you there. Her fists clenched at her sides. But she said nothing. That was what he wanted, a reaction. But Connor wasn't satisfied by lunchtime. It had spread. A rumor. She wasn't sure who started it. But she could guess. As she walked into the cafeteria, the whispers followed her. Did you hear? She tried to fight Connor. No way. Huh. Yeah, swung on him and everything. Bet she cried after. She stopped in her tracks. Her mouth went dry. Connor sat at his usual table, grinning as he scrolled through his phone like none of it mattered. Her fingers curled into the fabric of her sweater. This was worse than the shoving. The stolen lunches, the tripping in the hallways. This was making sure she was alone, making sure no one wanted to sit with her, talk to her, be seen with her, and it worked. She sat alone that day. And the next. And the next. By Friday, she thought maybe he was done. Maybe he had gotten bored. She was wrong. The final bell rang. And Ava walked toward the front doors, relieved to be going home. She was halfway across the parking lot when she heard the voice behind her. Hey, Sinclair. She ignored it. Kept walking. Where are you going? Thought we were friends. Her fingers gripped the straps of her backpack tighter. The pavement felt too open, too exposed. A hand grabbed her wrist. She jerked away, spinning around. Don't touch me. Connor grinned like this was all a game. Relax. I just wanted to say hi. The boys behind him laughed. They always did. Ava's pulse pounded in her ears. Leave me alone. Connor leaned in, his voice low. Or what? You gonna tell on me? Ava swallowed hard, thinking. Then he flicked her backpack strap. You're just mad, 'cause nobody cares. Something snapped. Before she knew what she was doing, Eva shoved him hard. Connor stumbled back a step, caught off guard. For the first time, he wasn't smirking, and that should have been the end of it, but it wasn't, because Connor wasn't used to being embarrassed, and in that moment, he decided to make sure she never forgot it. Eva barely slept that night. The moment her head hit the pillow, her mind replayed the scene in the parking lot, the look on Connor's face when she shoved him. The way his friends had gone quiet for just a second before the laughter started again. She had never touched him before, never fought back, and now she had no idea what was coming next. Saturday passed without anything happening. Then Sunday. By Monday morning, Ava convinced herself that maybe, just maybe, Connor had decided to move on. She should have known better. It started with the stares. Then the whispers. By third period, the snickers had turned into something else as she walked down the hallway. Students turned their phones toward her, pretending to be looking at something funny. Some pointed, some laughed under their breath. Others just shook their heads, like they knew something she didn't. Eva's stomach twisted. She slid into her desk in English class, eyes glued to the scratched-up surface, trying to block out the murmurs around her. Then a voice from behind her. Nice photos, Sinclair. Eva's head snapped up. Lena Carmichael, one of Connor's friends, was smirking as she tapped on her phone. Eva's chest tightened. Her hands fumbled for her phone in her backpack. When she unlocked it, her notifications were flooded. Her breath caught in her throat. It was a picture of her, taken in the school parking lot, when she had shoved Connor, but someone had edited it in the new version. Ava's face was twisted with exaggerated anger. Bold red letters had been slapped across the top. Psycho Sinclair can't control herself. Her fingers trembled. And there were comments, dozens of them. Wow. She looks unhinged. No wonder she has no friends. Connor should have hit her back. I heard she tried to scratch his face. It wasn't just a rumor now. It was something worse. Something people could see and believe. Ava's throat tightened. She forced herself to swallow. She wouldn't cry. Not here. Not in front of them. Lena leaned forward again, her voice syrupy sweet. Connor says you have a temper problem. Maybe you should get some help. Eva's pulse hammered. She stared straight ahead, her nails digging into her palms. She had never felt so humiliated in her life. By lunchtime, everyone had seen the picture. By the time school let out, it was all anyone talked about. And by the time Eva made it home, she was ready to disappear. But when she walked through the front door, her father was waiting, and he had his phone in his hand. Ava. His voice was steady, too steady. Sit down. Her stomach twisted. She sank onto the couch. Her backpack still on her shoulders. Her father turned the phone toward her. It was the same photo. The same words. His face was unreadable. "You want to explain this to me?" Eva's heart pounded. I didn't do anything. I know." His eyes darkened. "I also know exactly who did." A lump formed in her throat. "Dad, please." But he wasn't listening anymore. He was already dialing a number. And in that moment, Ava knew that Connor had finally messed with the wrong person. Eva's father wasn't a man who yelled. He didn't slam doors or make threats. When he was angry, he got quiet, and right now, the silence in the living room was thick enough to suffocate. He held the phone to his ear. His expression unreadable. Eva watched as he spoke. His voice calm but firm. "Principal Dawson, we need to talk, now." Eva's stomach twisted. Her father, the man who had spent years breaking up gang disputes and corruption cases in the city, was now handling her school drama. And he wasn't treating it like drama at all. She could hear the muffled voice of Principal Dawson on the other end, something about looking into it. Something about kids being kids. Her father's jaw tensed. "No, we're not going to look into it. We're going to fix it. Today." Eva sat frozen. She had never seen him like this. Within an hour, they were in his car, driving to West Ridge Middle. The building looked different in the evening light, emptier, quieter. As they walked in, Principal Dawson was already waiting by the front office, arms crossed over his chest. "Chief Sinclair," he greeted with a forced smile. "I understand you have some concerns." Her father didn't bother with small talk. "Connor Tate has been harassing my daughter for over a month. And now he's spreading false accusations about her online." He pulled out his phone, holding it up. "This is what I want removed." The principal shifted uncomfortably. "Now, Chief, let's not blow this out of proportion. I spoke with Connor's parents, and they assured me." "I don't care what his parents assured you." Her father's voice was steel. "I care about what he did." The principal hesitated. "We don't want to punish a student for." Her father stepped forward, lowering his voice. "Do you know what my job is? Dawson, I enforce the law, and last I checked, cyber harassment and targeted bullying fall under some serious categories." He paused. "But you know what's worse? A school that turns a blind eye to it." Eva watched as the color drained from the principal's face. I'll talk to the Tates again." He stammered. Her father didn't move. "You'll do more than talk. You'll make sure that picture is taken down. You'll make sure this doesn't happen again. And you'll hold Connor accountable." Eva had never seen Principal Dawson look nervous before. But right now, he did. That's when the office door opened, and Connor Tate walked in, followed by his parents. His father, Richard Tate, was a man with a presence, broad shoulders, expensive suit, the kind of man who owned country clubs and golf courses. His mother was smaller, wearing a tight smile that never reached her eyes. Connor, though, had lost his smirk. "Chief Sinclair," Richard said smoothly, "I don't see why this had to become a whole spectacle." Her father didn't blink. "Your son made it one." Mrs. Tate let out a sharp laugh. "Come on, they're just kids. They push each other. Rawhouse, this is all so unnecessary." Eva felt her fists clench. "Unnecessary?" Her father took a slow breath before speaking. "If my daughter had done to your son what he did to her, would we be standing here? Or would you already have a lawyer lined up, Mr. Tate's jaw twitched. "Now, let's not make this about. It is about something. It's about power. It's about what you let your son get away with. And it ends here." Connor shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting toward his parents. Her father turned to Principal Dawson. "What's the school's official response?" The principal hesitated, glancing at the Tates before clearing his throat. "Connor will be suspended, effective immediately." The room went silent. Mrs. Tate gasped. "Suspended? For what?" "A stupid joke, Mr. Tate's face darkened. "You can't do this. Do you know who I am?" Her father didn't blink. "Do you know who I am?" The room felt colder. Mr. Tate's mouth pressed into a thin line. "This isn't over." Ava's father didn't flinch. "You're right. It's not." Connor swallowed hard. He wasn't grinning anymore. This time, he was the one who looked afraid Connor Tate didn't show up to school the next day, or the day after that. By the end of the week, the rumors had started. I heard his dad tried to fight the school board over his suspension. Nah. I heard his mom called the district, demanding they expunge it from his record. Someone said his family's thinking about pulling him out and sending him to private school. Eva listened, but never said a word. She just walked to class. Eva kept her head down and ignored the glances. Except this time, they weren't filled with pity or laughter this time. They were filled with something else, respect. By Monday, the photo of her had disappeared from every social media account. Principal Dawson had made an announcement about online harassment and how the school had a zero-tolerance policy for bullying. It was the kind of speech that would have meant nothing before. But now people were listening. By Wednesday, Ava could walk down the hallway without feeling the weight of whispers behind her back. The snickers had faded, the stares had softened. A few students even offered her nods, silent acknowledgments that they had seen what happened. And then there were the ones who still didn't know where they stood at lunch. Ava sat alone. She had gotten used to that part. But today, as she picked at the edges of her tray, a figure slid into the seat across from her. She looked up. Lena Carmichael. Ava's stomach tensed. She half expected another snide remark, another fake sweet jab at her expense. But instead, Lena just pushed her food around with her fork. She started, not quite meeting Ava's eyes. Guess you got the last laugh. Huh? Ava didn't answer. Lena cleared her throat. Look, I wasn't really trying to be a part of all that. Ava let her fork clink against the tray. You just laughed? Lena winced. Ava didn't have the energy for this. She picked up her tray and stood. Lena shifted uncomfortably. He had it coming, you know? Ava turned back. Lena finally looked at her for the first time. There was no smirk, no arrogance, just something else. Guilt. Ava didn't say anything. She just walked away, because today, for the first time in a long time, she had a choice. She wasn't the one hiding anymore. Connor Tate was. And maybe, just maybe, that meant something had finally changed. But Ava wasn't done yet. The next evening, she sat at the kitchen table while her father poured himself a cup of coffee. How's school? He asked. Like it was any normal day. Ava shrugged. Better. He raised an eyebrow. Just better? She smirked. Well, better than it was last week. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. That's good. He took a slow sip of his coffee. You know, I'm proud of you. Ava blinked. For what? Her father set his mug down. You stood up for yourself. She hesitated. I shouldn't have had to. His expression softened. No, you shouldn't have. Ava exhaled, staring at the grain of the wooden table beneath her hands. What happens to Connor? Her father leaned back in his chair. That's up to him. Ava frowned. What do you mean? Her father studied her carefully. Actions have consequences. He was learning that now. Whether he changed or not, that was on him. She had thought about that for so long. For years, Connor had seemed untouchable. He had the right friends, the right family, the right last name. He walked through the world like nothing could ever touch him, but he had been wrong. Ava wasn't afraid of him anymore. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real victory. Because this time, when she walked into school, she wasn't the one looking over her shoulder. Ava never saw Connor Tate again by the time the week ended. His family had pulled him out of school. Some said he was transferring to a private academy in another district. Others whispered that his father had pulled some strings to enroll him in a boarding school out of state. Either way, he was gone, and for the first time in a long time. Ava could breathe, but just because Connor was gone didn't mean everything was suddenly perfect. The damage had already been done. The weight of his cruelty, the months of humiliation, they didn't just vanish overnight. There was still the stares, the hushed conversations that stopped when she walked by, the students who didn't know whether to pretend like nothing had happened or acknowledge that everything had. But Ava wasn't waiting for their approval anymore. Instead, she did something she never would have dared before. She raised her hand in class, spoke up when she had something to say, looked people in the eye when she passed them in the halls. And slowly, Very slowly, the isolation began to crack on Friday. A girl from her math class slid into the seat next to her at lunch. Didn't say much, just a casual, "Hey." A day later, someone asked her if she wanted to be in their group for a project instead of just letting the teacher assign her by Monday. A boy from her English class, a quiet kid who never got involved in anything, muttered under his breath as he walked past her locker. What he did was messed up. Ava turned. What? The boy adjusted his backpack strap. Barely looking at her, just saying, "If I had known it was that bad. He cut himself off, shaking his head. Doesn't matter. But it did. It mattered because people were finally seeing, not just Ava, but what had happened, what they had let happen. Because silence was its own kind of crime, she didn't say anything back. Just gave him a small nod. It was enough that night. She sat in the living room, flipping through a book while her father read the newspaper. The television was on in the background. The low hum of some crime show neither of them were really watching. "You know," her father said, folding the newspaper and setting it on the table. "I had my own Connor Tate when I was your age." Eva glanced up. "Yeah." He nodded. Didn't have social media back then. But the game was the same. He leaned back, his eyes distant, like he was watching something from a long time ago. "There's always someone who thinks they can get away with it." Eva hesitated. "Did you do anything about it?" Her father exhaled slowly. "I didn't have a choice." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He turned to her, his expression steady. "I had to make a decision. Let him decide who I was. Or decide that for myself." Eva swallowed. And her father smiled slightly. "I'm sitting here, aren't I?" A small laugh escaped her, surprising even herself. "Yeah, guess you are." He patted her shoulder. "And you are too." Eva sat with that for a while. Because for the longest time, it had felt like Connor had all the power. Like he decided how things went. Like she had no control. But that wasn't true. She had made a choice to speak. To fight. To push back. And that had made all the difference on Monday morning. She walked into school. The halls felt different. Or maybe she was different. Lena Carmichael gave her a small nod from across the hallway. Not an apology. Not an excuse. But something close enough. The boy from English class held the door open for her without saying anything, and when she sat down in the cafeteria, a girl from her history class slid into the seat across from her. "You mind if I sit here?" Eva looked at her for a moment. Then she shrugged. "Go for it." She wasn't looking for an apology from the whole school. She didn't need one, because she had already won, not by getting rid of Connor Tate, but by making sure that next time, someone like him wouldn't win so easily. Because next time, people wouldn't just look away. No one should have to fight to be treated with respect. No one should have to prove they deserve to exist without being harassed. But the truth is, standing up for yourself isn't always easy. Sometimes, people will look away. Sometimes, they'll pretend it's not happening. But silence helps bullies win, and the moment you stop being silent, the moment you refuse to let them define you, that's when they lose their power. If this story meant something to you, consider subscribing, because these conversations matter, and the more we talk about them, the harder it is for anyone to pretend they don't.